What's up guys, Jace2Cents here, and today we're going to talk about some more low-cost options for your gaming setups. Today we're taking a look at the Viewsonic Xg2405. They did sponsor this video and send us this particular monitor. I've not taken a look at it yet, but I figure since we're a huge fan of their Elite series that we've been using, you guys have seen it, I figure we take a look at what some of their lower options are. And check it out, it has birds. Okay, so the Xg2405. Let's talk about some of the main specs first. Maybe we'll explain what some of those specs are if you are kind of shopping for monitors. There's a lot of tape on this. If you're kind of shopping for monitors for the first time. Also too, if you hear our heater going, it is cold. We did forget to turn it on last night before we left. And you know, 60 degrees Fahrenheit in SoCal, man, that's parka weather. So we had to turn the heater on. Sorry about the noise. Snow boots, I mean, that's why I'm wearing a sweater. Some of the main specs on this, it is a 1080p panel, so FHD, full HD, which isn't full anymore these days, which is kind of funny. It is a 144 Hertz IPS 1 millisecond response time. The more budget monitors now are starting to have a lot of the features that you would only find on hundreds and hundreds of dollars monitors. That sentence, wow. You would usually find that on monitors that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. There we go. So right now at the time of making this video, and I'm gonna go right into pricing because this might keep some people interested. At B&H Photo, you can get this exact panel for $179. To put things into perspective, a panel of this nature, it's also a 24-inch panel. When I was first getting into high refresh rate panels, to get a monitor that was a TN panel, remember this is IPS, would have cost me $300 6 years ago, back in 2014 when I first started playing around with some of the high refresh rate stuff. So you would get terrible color recreation. You would get, again, 144 Hertz, and then 1 millisecond response time. Now the response time is how fast it takes that pixel to go from on to off. And there's different ways to measure that, whether it's black to black or gray to gray. Usually the measurements are in gray to gray. But that means you're not gonna get ghosting on the screen. And then the refresh rate is just how many times the screen can refresh the image per second. That's a very simple way of putting it. So with graphics cards becoming as powerful as they are today, having a 1080p panel at 144 Hertz means it's going to be perfect for shooters. It's going to be perfect for any sort of esports title where FPS matters, because remember, FPS can have a direct relation to your input lag. So getting higher FPS without screen tearing and having a buttery smooth image, whether it be 1080p or higher resolution, is going to be a win-win for basically anyone. And as you can see, putting it together is very simple. The base is in one piece. The stand is in one piece. It's got a captive screw on here so that you don't lose it. It's got a little flip out handle. You just tighten this down and then you are assembled. 24-inch Viewsonic Xg2405. Now it does also come included with an HDMI cable. Because of high refresh rate, I highly recommend that you run a DisplayPort cable. However, with HDMI 2.0, you can actually run 144 Hertz at 1080p over a standard HDMI. That's not a problem. If you're running higher resolutions though, you're going to have to run a DisplayPort cable. I'm also going to have to run a DisplayPort cable because the PC I'm going to be testing this with today is my Star Wars themed case mod that I did that only has DisplayPort on its outputs. It's got 3 inputs, so it's got 2 HDMIs and 1 DisplayPort. Of course, it's got an internal power supply, which is nice because that means there's no inline brick to worry about. You don't have to worry about hiding a brick or anything. It's not the thinnest of panels, but as you can see, it's not super thick or fat either. If you want to mount this on an arm, you can. It's also VESA 100. So you would undo these screws right here. There's 4 of them. And then the panel would come off. You can mount your VESA arm and have it mounted to a wall, have it mounted to an arm on your desk, or just use it as it comes. So let's get this thing fired up. Let's take a look at the color. Let's take a look at some of the refresh rates. We'll show you how to activate a high refresh rate panel, and maybe your first time ever using one. You may have one now and not even have it activated and don't even know, because if you've never seen higher than 60 FPS, you probably don't even know you're missing out on it. Not gonna lie, there's people who've asked me before, I have this panel, is this a high refresh rate panel? It's like, yes, and they're like, how do I turn it on? And they've had it for like a year and never even turned on higher than 60. So we'll show you guys how to do all that in a minute. Now in terms of cable management, it does come with this little guy right here, which I think I just did upside down. There we go. So that's a little clip that will just hold on to some of your cables, which can then keep it in line with the base. So if you're putting it on a desk or something and it's like that, then you're not gonna really see the cables. So just want to show you guys that that part is actually separate. And you got to put that on. All right, so first things first, I'm gonna talk about the built-in speakers. Very rarely are built-in speakers in a monitor worth using or talking about. In fact, these, I love Viewsonic, but they're terrible. You can't hear them at all. With our AC going, I thought they weren't working in that yeah, in fact, they're so bad, I think it would be worth like troubleshooting at that point to say, okay, I have sound working with my system. However, it does have a 3.5 millimeter jack built into them. So if you have the DisplayPort or audio cable being used as your audio interface, instead of having to run then a power and cable all the way to your computer, you can use these, or this 3.5 millimeter jack in here to pass through your audio. That way then you have a much shorter run to your speakers, which now these are just little like $5 Amazon basic speaker, or Amazon, Amazon Basics, is that what they're called? Yeah. Look at that. Let's just go to the best channel in the world, Jay's 2 cents. Is that how you spell it? Yeah. And then let's see. Cool. So we were using the monitor now as an audio pass-through. So something worth pointing out, that's what that jack is for. I wouldn't recommend using it for headphones, because if the headphones are plugged in, then they're going to go to the headphones. And if you want to unplug the headphones, it's a pain in the butt. You could just use the headphone jack right here on these. Remember, these are terrible, terrible speakers. I just wanted to show how the pass-through works. Now let's go ahead and talk about the color. It's IPS. So the color looks fantastic. I've not touched the color profile. I've not gone in here and adjusted any of that. You can change the particular modes. So we've got standard, which is what we're in now, FPS game, RTS game, MOBA. These are just different like color profiles. Wow. So FPS game made it very contrasty. RTS game, yeah, I would probably just not use that one. Same with that. Let's see what movie does. So it actually mutes a lot of the color. It looks a little bit more like a cinema grade. So there's web. That's like a little bit more punchy in colors. I don't like it. You guys see the icon. You guys probably can't tell on the camera, but the icons are a little bit more, it looks like the vibrance has been turned up. Text, I assume that's gonna make text look a little more clear if you're doing like, yeah, so what that does is it brings down the overall brightness so that if you're looking at like a Word document or something of the white background, you're not gonna be blinding yourself. So I honestly think standard is just the best. I think it looked the best on standard. So let's go and talk about refresh rate. There's a website that you guys can go to here, and it's just Ufo Monitor Test. And if you guys want to sort of follow along with your particular system, you can do that. So this is a free website where it just has this different, this little UFO guy going across the screen at different refresh rates or frame rates. So you've got 60 FPS, which you can see is smooth. But what you may not be able to tell by looking at on camera, but you should open up another window and maybe look at this alongside our video, you'll be able to see the blur happening at 60 FPS, you can see the judder happening at 30, and then obviously the terrible FPS of 15, showing how much it moves in between each frame, which gives it a very stuttery look. So the higher frame rate is going to give you a smoother effect, obviously. Now we're only set to 60 FPS right now. So this is where a lot of people don't know where to go and change their FPS. Now you can do it in your driver. You can go into NVIDIA control panel and do it. You can go into AMD Radeon software and do it. I prefer to do it inside Windows because sometimes you see options that don't necessarily show up to you. Like if you look right here, this inside the control panel for NVIDIA stops at 120 Hertz. So it gives you all these increments, 23, 24, 25, 29, 30, 50, 59, 60, 100, 119, 120. So it gives you all of those options. But if we go into the control panel for Windows and hit right click, display settings, come down here to advanced display settings, then click display adapter properties, and then click, yeah, they should make this a little easier. Then click monitor, then you can see screen refresh rate. Now we were only set to 60 right now, but as you can see in here, we get the option for our 144. So the monitor is clearly reporting back like, hey, I'm a 144 Hertz panel. For some reason, NVIDIA doesn't see the option, so you can enable it here. It now detects that we have a 144 Hertz panel, so you can see 144 shows up, and then half of that, and then half of that again, because it's always showing half rate at that point. So you can see just how smooth the 144 is now. So I'm wondering how many people watching this video right now maybe didn't even know they had a higher refresh rate panel than they currently have because of the fact that Windows will only go to 60 FPS automatically. Now, if you have a high refresh rate panel and those options aren't showing up, it means that your cable probably does not support the bandwidth needed for the refresh rate and that resolution. So remember, if you're trying to push more frames at that resolution, you need more bandwidth because that's way more data. So if you're trying to push 120 FPS at 1080p versus 60, that's obviously double the amount of data that needs to be transferred. So the HDMI standard thing now is 18 gigabit per second, and it's going up obviously because of 8K. DisplayPort 1.4 is going to obviously unlock all of those options for you, 144 hertz, 4K even. So if you're running DisplayPort, it's why I recommend it, because then you don't have the older USB standard holding you back. HDMI. I just wanted to see how it was going to look at 144. I'm not really seeing any sort of ghosting. I'm not seeing any trailing. So that tells us that our 1 millisecond, it's probably close to that. It's funny, those numbers are very advertiser, if you will. There's a lot of discussion about what a true 1 millisecond looks like. A lot of panels will, I think in my opinion, anything 5 millisecond or below is acceptable. We showed you guys before what a high refresh rate panel with a slow response time looks like. It smudges all across the screen because remember, this shows how many pixels per frame it's moving. So if we're moving 7 pixels to the right every time it redraws a frame, if the previous pixels haven't refreshed fast enough, which is the response time, then you'll see some of that fading out image as it moves, which is then going to give you like a trail behind the UFO. And it's very obvious on this website if you have a high refresh rate panel with a slow response time, it'll smear all across the screen. So that's why we like this website. It's just testufo.com. All right, so let's talk about tearing, because that's the other aspect. Since we were just talking about G-Sync and FreeSync, what G-Sync and FreeSync are designed to do is to make the frame rate smoother if you fall below the refresh rate of the panel. So that's designed to smooth out the frame rates, that way it doesn't look juddery or jerky as the frame rates are fluctuating. Now tearing, because the screen is drawn from top to bottom, when you do a quick motion like that, because the frame on the panel can't refresh as fast as the data is being sent to it, because we have sync technology turned off right now, you would see the screen then split apart from top to bottom, depending on how fast the frame is currently drawing, how fast the data is being sent to it. The colors look great. They look accurate because it's IPS panel. If this was TN, you would see, like, as I turn the panel like this, you would see major color shift. But if you take a look sideways here, as I turn it, and it is a swivel base, by the way, you can see we are not getting any color shift. Sure, you get a little bit of an off viewing angle, sort of a dimming, but that's just because of the nature of the fact that it's one, LED backlit, which is edge lit technically, and we'll take a look at backlighting in a second here. It is reflecting off of a foil that's lighting our scene. And because we have a matte finish here, when you turn sideways, you do get some dimming just because of the nature of the way the panel is constructed. The only time you're never gonna get dimming when you look at it sideways is if you're looking at like an OLED screen. But clearly OLEDs on desktop monitors is not a widespread thing yet. So let's go ahead and talk about the lighting here. One of the downfalls, in my opinion, of backlit LCDs, and yes, this is an LCD panel, an IPS LCD that is LED lit. There's a lot of misconception between LCD. People think LCD is the panel type, and that's true, but there's multiple layers of what's happening here with the way a panel is constructed. There's fluorescent LCD, which is the older, much thicker flat panel technology, would have a light back here, basically like a fluorescent tube or a cold cathode, kind of zigzagged back behind here, which would give you very uneven lighting. And LED technology being much brighter, much lower energy, much longer life, and also much smaller, allows you to get thin panels like this now with even lighting. But what we're going to look for here is any sort of flashlight effect. Flashlight effect refers to the corners. Typically the corners on LCD panels are the brightest because that's where the lighting takes a turn. Remember I said it's edge lit. So you'll get more lights right here focusing in an area on the corners than say the center of the panel. So you'll get this bright edge versus a darker center simply because of the fact that the way that the lighting is edge lit. This also does not have any sort of local dimming, which is something that you would see to get a higher contrast ratio, where if you had a dark scene, it would dynamically dim that particular panel zone to make the contrast a little bit better. The dark's darker, the bright's brighter. But this does not have any of that, which in my opinion is fine. I am not a fan of local dimming whatsoever. All right, so this is just a solid black image. So depending on the viewing angle, and I'll sort of turn this, It's pretty uniform. It's not too blotchy. You can see though, right here in this corner, depending on the angle that you look at, keep your eyes right here. There's a little bit of a light bleed happening right there, depending on how you look at it. So from this angle, you can't really see it, but watch as I turn it this way. You can see it sort of appear. The corners though, surprisingly, are very evenly lit. You don't see any flashlighting happening here in the corner. And they call it flashlighting because it literally looks like the beam of a flashlight. And you'll see it jet out from all corners. So here's what gray looks like, and you can see that gray is pretty uniform. It doesn't look bad at all. So that's why once you have some sort of color and other things happening on the screen, the slight amount of bleeding that you see on the corners, or even on the edge that was there, is completely gone. Man, this has come a long way. If this was a TN panel, as we turn it, you would see it like rainbowing and stuff. TN panel, you're either gonna have terrible off-viewing axis angles or height problems, where if you're not looking at it straight on, it's just a really like tinfoily mess. The fact that you can now get an IPS panel that's 144 Hertz, 1 millisecond response time, FreeSync technology for under $200 is just absolutely astonishing. In my opinion anyway. And this is coming from someone that has been like, I don't care about panel tech, to I'm a complete panel snob. I think that says something. One other thing I forgot to point out is it is obviously height adjustable and swivelable, but I can't swivel it all the way around because of the cables that are in there. So you could make this a vertical panel next to you if you're a programmer or something and you want a vertical panel so you can see long code, then you can do that. So that's what makes a panel like this perfect for anyone that wants to use it for a vertical format, because if you run a TN panel or something and you turn it like that, then the viewing angles become completely obvious that they are not intended for that. But you know, I think it shows that we've obviously come a long way where you can get a lot of tech crammed into a panel now for not having to spend a lot of money. That's because of ultra wides becoming such high popularity now. You've got 1440p panels and 4K panels really starting to become more normal. 1080p, which is still perfectly fine for, I think, most anybody. I would personally take a lower resolution like 1080p to get the other stats of the high refresh rate, the low response time, the IPS color over a higher resolution at say 60, it's locked at 60p or whatever. So I think it's a panel that you definitely should take a look at if you're considering upgrading your setup, getting a better panel, or expanding your panels on your desk. Just do me a favor, if you're gonna get more than one panel, make sure they're matched, please. That's a personal thing of mine. Don't send me pictures if you're like, I've got 3 different panels on my desk. But once again, a huge thank you to Viewsonic for sending us this panel to take a look at. We were kind of discussing where this panel sort of would be really strong, and it's obviously for anyone that doesn't want to run larger than a 24-inch panel. I personally like 27s or larger, but if you're doing like, if you're having little LAN parties or you've got a small setup, you can see we've got it paired with a small form factor vertical tower right here. You would not need a lot of desk space here to have a pretty awesome setup with a panel that's not going to be terrible to look at, because you can have the best hardware in the world, and if your panel sucks, your panel is going to make your best hardware seem like crap hardware. I think this one is definitely a winner. We've always been a fan of the Viewsonic panels. We've been advertising the Elite series now for over a year. We still use it as our test panel. You've seen it all the time as we throw it up here on the desk when we're testing various things. I use it when we're doing the XOC overclocking. In fact, when we had a small LAN party here not that long ago, I think there was a small argument taking place over who gets to use it. So anyway, this is just like the little brother to that guy, and I think you guys deserve checking out the link in the description below to see what a panel under 200 bucks can actually give you now as we move forward and panel tech becoming cheaper and more widely available. So thanks for watching this video, guys. What is your go-to inexpensive panel, your budget-friendly panel? Obviously, the Xg2405 is one that you guys should take a look at. But if you've got another recommendation, put down in the comments below what you think it is, and maybe we'll take a look at it. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.